Hello friends, so welcome to this lecture on Azure Storage Security Layers. So in this lecture we'll have an overview that what are the different security features we can use with the Azure Storage. So the first one is management plane security. See, the management plane when we talk about consist of operations that affect the storage account itself. So let's say you have a storage account ABC. So in that case, we are just talking about the storage account access, like its storage keys, right? And who should be having access to the storage account. It is now your storage account has further data, blobs, tables, queues. So we are not talking about the data. So that is the data plane security. Here it is about the management plane, means managing of your storage account. So for example, you can create, delete storage account and get a list of storage account and a subscription, right? Retrieve the storage account keys or regenerate the keys. So this is all about the management plane. But if we'll talk about the management plane security, so in that case, we use the role-based access or RBAC. So RBAC is generally we provide access to different users, groups, or application depending on their role, whether they need access to the Azure subscription or they need access to a particular resource, right? So in that case, we'll be able to grant access to different users, and access is granted by assigning the appropriate role-based access to a user, group, or application at the right scope, means the right resource. And like we discussed, so access can be granted on a entire subscription level, right? For that, you need to assign a role accordingly, and access can be assigned on a resource group by assigning the that particular level of permissions. So you need to understand that okay, there are certain roles, inbuilt roles which provide access at the management layer, and there are certain roles which provide access to the data plane. So we need to choose that okay, if a user needs to manage blobs or queues within the storage account, we need to provide appropriate role according to that. But if you need to manage the storage accounts only, right, provide other users access to the storage account, or need to manage the keys and all those things, so we need to provide the access uh, to the management plane only. So there are different like owner, contributor, reader, storage account, contributor role, right? And these are the different roles we can provide to the different users. When we talk about the management plane security, the another thing which we need to take care about is the storage account keys. Remember in the first lecture we discussed whenever we create a storage account, there are certain two keys basically, one primary key and secondary access keys are generated. So we need to make sure that okay, security of those keys is maintained because those are the keys to your kingdom. So those keys are rotated properly and access should be given only to the person who need that access keys. So for security reasons, those should be regenerated, right? Periodically. Then we have is the see, now we discuss about the storage account, its management, how we will be managing the security, means who will be having access to the secure storage account. Now once we know that okay, this is the storage account, then we apply certain kind of network level restrictions to your security account, to your storage account. Network security enables you to restrict access to the data in a Azure storage account from, let's say, particular VNet or a particular subnet. You need to provide access to a storage account. With the help of Azure Firewall, we can do that. So you can use the Azure Storage Firewall to restrict access to, let's say, from certain public IP addresses or from certain VNets. And remember, by default, when we talk about access to all network is provided, including the internet, and it is always a security best practice to provide access as per the, let's say, a particular VNet or from which, depending where the application is or your resources which is trying to access your storage account. For example, you can see this snapshot. So this is a storage account, and this is the option firewall and virtual networks. So if you'll see, so by default, generally when you open it is like all networks, but recommended is that okay, you select a particular network that okay, if your application or virtual machine is in VNet which is trying to store images or in the storage accounts. In that case, you need to provide the address range or the VNet or the subnet which will be having access to the storage account. There are other options like exceptions, allow Microsoft trusted services to the storage account, right? So there are the different options with the help of which we can control which networks would be having access to your storage account. So the third option we have is the data plane security. This is very important. Again, we need to understand about the data plane security. See, in the last lecture, we studied about the providing access using, integrating AD for SMB, for blobs and queues, and then we use the shared access keys and shared access, signature keys. So, what we are trying to do over here is, see, in data, in management plane security, we discussed that, okay, access to a storage account is provided. So here we have not touched up the content within the storage account like containers, blobs, queues, or files or tables within that. When we talk about the data plane security, we are actually talking about providing access to the data uh, within your storage account. So in that case, we have the different options. So data plane basically refers to methods which are used to secure data objects in your Azure like blobs, queues, tables, and files. And in the last lecture, we studied about, we touched a little bit about the encryption part in transit and rest. But encryption is like you have uh, cipher the content. You have secured means no one will be able to read the content. But authorization, when we talk about a data plane security, we control how someone would be accessing to the objects, basically controlling access to the objects within your storage account. So we have three main options like Azure AD to authorize access to containers, queues, and so in that case, when we use the Azure AD to provide access to the data, so it really helps in using the option not to secure, not to use the not to I would say the store the code or store the secrets within your code. So you can use the Azure AD or AD identity to basically access the objects within your storage account. Then we discuss about that using your storage account keys to authorize access via the shared key. Like shared key is like primary key and the secondary key which you use when you create your storage account. And authorization via shared key or your primary or secondary key requires storing your storage account keys in your application. So in that case also Microsoft recommend using the Azure AD wherever it is possible. And so like we discussed, in case of shared key also we are providing access to one will be having full access to your storage account and objects within that. So in that case, it is not recommended, and we should use this Azure AD to have to avoid the life cycle issues as well. And then we have is the shared access signatures to basically grant the controlled permissions to a specific data for a specific amount of time, like we discussed. Let's say if you want to upload, if you want that user should allow access to upload blob into your storage account for a let's say for 1 hour or let's say for 3 hours, depending on the blob size. You can guess that, right? How much time it's gonna take. So with the help of shared access signature, we can provide the time bound access. In that case, a particularly the information like the length of time, the access to the object, all these options are given. It is a kind of a token which is given to a particular user or to a identity to access a particular resource. And like in this case also we discussed in the blob story you can allow public access to your blobs by setting appropriate permissions like providing anonymous access and all those options we have discussed. And then we have the encryption in transit. See, what we are discussing is different layers, providing access to storage account. Then we have the network level restrictions. Here we do have the role-based access controls provided over here, right? But in addition to that, we can also allow with the network security who will be having access. Then who will be having access to data. within that storage account. And now we have is like, let's say someone is having the access, but if let's say data is encrypted, then in that case also no one will be able to read. So we have two options: encryption in transit and encryption at rest. So encryption in transit, like securing your data when you transfer your data. So in this case, this is like another step you should ensure that the security of your Azure storage is to encrypt the data between the client and Azure storage. So it is always recommended to use the HTTPS protocol to encrypt the data between the client and the Azure storage. So in this case, when we use the HTTPS, a secure channel is established to basically to transfer the data. You can also have the for always use HTTPS when calling the REST APIs or accessing objects uh, in the storage. And the another option we have is using the client-side encryption in case of encryption in transit. See, the data is encrypted before being transferred to the Azure storage. So in that case, whatever the data will be transferred to the Azure storage when we use this client-side encryption in case of encryption in transit. So before the data is transferred to the storage account, it is encrypted, and vice versa as well. Let's say you need to retrieve the data from the storage account, so it will be decrypted at the client end only. So that is the using the client-side encryption. And then we have is the encryption at rest, that then data is stored. So there are three Azure features that provide the encryption at rest. See, in the VM section, we discuss about the Azure disk encryption, which is used to encrypt the OS and the data disk in case of IaaS, in case of basically the virtual machines which are having the OS and the data disk which we have attached. And then we have is the client side and storage service encryption, SSE we call it as, are both used to encrypt data in Azure Storage. So we have discussed about the client-side encryption. So SSE is like which is basically enabled for all storage accounts, and you cannot disable it. Let's say when you create a storage account, so SSE is enabled by default, and SSE automatically encrypts your data when you write something into your storage account. So when you read data from your storage, it is decrypted by the Azure Storage before being returned. So in this case, SSE enables you to secure your data without having actually to modify your code or adding code to your application. See, in case of SSE as well, storage service encryption, you can use either the Microsoft managed key or your own custom keys. So if you are using, let's say, Microsoft generated keys, so Microsoft manage the keys handles the secure storage as well as a regular rotation. And so in that case, let's say if you are using your own keys, you need to take care of the key rotation, how you'll be securing your keys, all those things you have to take care of. So in this case also, like I said, that we can use the client-side encryption. We mentioned even though the data which is there in the Azure storage is encrypted, but you can use the client-side encryption before putting the data into Azure storage. You can use the client-side encryption. So in this case, we discuss about the different security layers we have from the management to the data which is lying at the rest in case of Azure's cloud. So this is it, friends, in this lecture. Thank you for watching this lecture. Meet you in the next lecture.